CIO from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration within the Department of Transportation. As CIO, Ms. Coggins provides leadership and oversight to ensure NHTSA's information technology systems and services effectively support and enable NHTSA's mission. She leads the development and implementation of IT and information resource management strategies, plans, standards, and policies, and also oversees numerous IT programs, including enterprise architecture, information assurance, and records management. Recently, she provided leadership in the successful execution of the IT system supporting the popular Clash for Clunkers presidential initiative that was implemented in less than 30 days and successfully processed approximately 700,000 transactions. She's been honored with numerous awards, including the Presidential Rank Award in 2008. And with that, we're going to go ahead and hand it off to Colleen.
Thank you, Parham. So, good morning. I think it's still morning. I know I'm the last presenter between you and lunch, but I'd like to share with you my experiences, my agency's experiences with implementing data warehousing and business intelligence tools. For those of you who were in this session or in this room prior to me, you got to see a DoD version, which was very exciting. The case study that I'm going to share with you for the use of these tools is Cash for Clunkers. And so just by show of hands, do you guys remember the Cash for Clunkers program about 2 years ago? Okay, perfect. It was, in fact, the most popular stimulus program under Obama's administration, mainly because it put money directly into the consumer's pocket. And so whereby in terms of job stimulus growth, we've had a lot of construction initiatives. This, of course, was extremely popular in terms of putting a rebate of either $3,500 or $4,500 in the consumer's pocket, dependent upon the increase in fuel efficiency for them trading in their gas-guzzling clunker for a new, more fuel-efficient car. So, as Parham alluded to in my bio, the legislation, once the legislation was passed, NHTSA, short for National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and that's how we call it, NHTSA, had 30 days to stand up that information system. And if you can imagine trying to stand up, design, develop, code, implement a secure nationwide transactional system with about 20,000 users, the end users was the dealer community, is no small feat. So we had a lot of constraints that we had to contend with in doing that. Obviously, the system had to interface with our back-end financial management system, which was built on the Oracle platform. And so we did choose Oracle as the tailored COTS solution that we leveraged. But there was a lot of tailoring we needed to do in 30 days in terms of instantiating the business rules for that front-end dealer interface. And needless to say, our focus was in getting the transactional system up and running. That was successfully deployed, and once the system and the program went live, we had to quickly focus our attention on the reporting aspects of the program. Initially, when the program was launched, the time frame was given about 4 months. In other words, $1 billion, Congress set aside $1 billion for this program, and the estimation was it would take 4 months to spend $1 billion. Well, needless to say, the program was so popular that we ran out of money the first week the program was launched. And so funds management was so crucial in overseeing this program, and thus, as you can imagine, the reporting was very critical in getting it right in terms of projections of when we would potentially run out of money. 20,000 users hitting a system simultaneously, if you will, with first in, first out as the business rule. So get your transaction in first, and of course, there's a natural competitive nature to that. So with that, as a background, let me just kind of go through some generalities on why do data warehousing and business intelligence, which of course I'm talking to a room full of IT experts and architects, so I'm sure you all get this and have probably instantiated this in your own agencies, but and we saw an example of this with the DoD presentation, streamlining access to multiple data sources, back-end operational data sources through one common interface based on, various themes of data. The data aggregation, and I'll get into this a little further, really huge volumes of data were collected from the dealer community and, of course, based on the consumers applying for the rebate. And we had to be able to slice and dice that pretty rapidly, as I mentioned. Performing trend analysis to identify and predict themes hidden within raw data. Admittedly, we did not do that much under Cash for Clunkers, but as we move forward, leveraging the business intelligence tool set that we acquired, we will be using that in the vein of basically identifying vehicular defects sooner than later within NHTSA. So we do see a lot of huge promise in that one area. Integrate and associate multiple data sets in separate systems for combined and unified analysis. You'll see as I delve deeper into this, there's about 5 or 6 different data sources just under Cash for Clunkers that we had to integrate and associate and be able to do executive level reporting. As we move further, NHTSA, we have about 30 mission critical applications in our portfolio, and they're grouped in our mission areas, vehicle safety or behavior modification. So we do see a lot of promise with that in the future as well. So a little bit more deeper, integration and intelligence, aggregation, summary data based on predefined rules, used to optimize query and searches. We see again in the future, and we're actually doing this at this point, I have project managers who are really kind of camped out with our safety defect engineers, learning how they query volumes and volumes of consumer complaint data, automotive sampling crash data, understanding the algorithms that they leverage to spot vehicular defect trends and automating those such that they can leverage their attention in terms of validating those trends, setting thresholds where something might seem like it's in the weeds within the normal range of complaints coming in, and at what point do we want to trigger an alert to a safety defect engineer to perhaps send out our investigators to validate or refute that trend. So those are things I think as NHTSA starts embracing this technology and moving forward, there's a lot of efficiencies that we can gain on the HR side and the investigative side. And so again, trend analysis and data mining. I'll show you some of the visualization that we developed for Cash for Clunkers. And let me just also emphasize, visualization is really critical in conveying a point and getting folks motivated and encouraged to move forward in any direction. We're always selling ourselves in our program. If you think you're not, you know, maybe that's an indicator that you need to look at what it is that you have in terms of data to help affect improve decision making, and the better that you can explain that and provide visualization of your data to your constituents and your consumers, typically the more supportive they are in terms of going in the direction that you're putting forward. We had within, and I'll use the term CARS, because we had two acronyms for Cash for Clunkers, but CARS was one of them, and so from now on, that's what I'm referencing. We had quite a huge burden in terms of the system processing. As I mentioned, 30 days to get this system stood up. And again, Congress initially allocated $1 billion. Once within the first week, it was identified that we were going to run out of money. Congress gave us an additional $2 billion, bless their heart. And so that extended the program. But during that time, as I said, the funds management reporting was so critical, we would have to send reports to the White House typically every hour to identify what the potential was in terms of expending that data, that funding. Interestingly enough, also at the time, the rejection rate for dealer submissions was extremely high. I think we were averaging, I want to say about 50–60% rejection, because the legislation was so complex. In order to get qualified for these rebates, the consumer had to, as one example, prove that the trade-in was actually a clunker that they were driving on our roadway. And so they had to bring in proof of active registration, that clunker wasn't just sitting in their backyard for the last 10 years collecting dust. No, we wanted to get them off our highways. So they had to bring in active registration and proof of insurance on that vehicle for the last 12 months. And if you can imagine, insurance agencies, they now typically insure you every 6 months. And so having to bring all that information in, we collected total about 13 terabytes of data once that, the program had gone through. But again, the operational reports that we had to run, we quickly found out we needed to set up our data warehouse and replicate that from the transactional processing system. And the burden was extremely high initially before we had done such. And so we did that. We replicated the data, I want to say, probably every hour on the hour, because, again, the necessity of the accuracy of the reports to the White House in terms of when we pull the plug, if you will, on allowing new transactions to be entered into the system was very critical, and we did a lot of funds projections based on that information. So I mentioned there was quite a few data sources that, through the life of the program, we had to integrate into the data warehouse and associate. Here's a few of them. One of the requirements of the Cash for Clunkers program was that the dealer had to report back that the clunker that was traded in eventually was crushed. And so the engine was disabled immediately at the dealer location, but we tracked the handoff from the dealer to the salvage facility to the disposal facility, ultimately to the crushing of that vehicle, because obviously we don't want those vehicles turning back up on our highways, or we don't want to, have some, obviously some underground activity in terms of it going to Mexico or other countries in terms of those clunkers, not being totally disposed of. So it was a responsibility of the dealers to report back to a Department of Justice system called MVETAS, which tracks the current title information on all of our vehicles across the United States. We brought in that data source, and again, they had to interface the status of that trade-in via that data source. The CARS transactional system itself, again, 8 terabytes of data, about 700,000 transactions, 3.5 million attachments, 23,000 new car dealers were the user base. We also, NHTSA is not the authoritative data source on the fuel economy and the fuel efficiency rating of vehicles. EPA is. And so the rebate was based on the delta in fuel efficiency from the trade-in and the new vehicle, and obviously the greater fuel efficiency, you got the larger rebate. So we had to bring in that data source to verify the mathematical calculation of the rebate. We also had the disposal forms, and I have to tell you, the user community, there's no dealers in the audience, right? We're talking high-level sophistication in terms of IT to very, low-level sophistication in terms of mom-and-pop dealers, to put it diplomatically. Folks were scanning in picture quality graphics in terms of the documents that they were sending in. And so there was a lot of user education that we had to do with the dealer community. And even in terms of, the rejection rate, just really looking at the rejection codes and really in understanding why they were getting it wrong so that we could have weekly seminars with them to educate them. And, basically we wanted to make sure that they got paid and the consumer got their rebate. So reporting again on that was key. And then finally, the back-end financial management system. So that was the entryway into securing the transactions via the Treasury to obviously reimburse the dealer community. So here again, here's about 5 or 6 different data sources that we had to integrate into for the CARS program. How do we get there? I think some agencies have done this extremely well, business intelligence and data warehousing. These are not new technologies by any stretch of the imagination. It was new for NHTSA, frankly, and so we're still learning. Again, the platform that we used was OBI, Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, and it was definitely on the requirement side, a trial and error process. So definitely an integrated product team approach to developing the queries, developing the reports that were most necessary and needed from the business community and the various different stakeholders from, certainly our administrator, the executives, and the White House in terms of funds management, and Congress. And there were some clear objectives in the legislation that we wanted to, and I'll show you examples of some of the reports that were run, but we wanted to demonstrate that the program successfully met certain objectives in terms of, as an example, the greening of America. And so that was one of the goals, is to, lower the carbon footprint from getting these guzzlers off of the roadway. So you can do that certainly in tabular report textual format, or you can, try to do that from a visualization standpoint, and I'll show you some examples of that. The dashboards, I mentioned in terms of various aspects, and you'll see examples from enforcement, compliance, operational readiness, funds management. These were all areas that we needed to develop very quickly to satisfy the various demands for information. Okay. So again, just a little bit more examples of the type of dashboards that were developed. I already kind of talked through some of these. Just a very quick high level on the operational aspects of the system. As I mentioned, the purchasers dealt with the dealers were the primary users. We had built-in workflow whereby we had 2 levels of review, And so we obviously wanted to do that from a compliance standpoint to make sure that we had in our processing center that there was no fraudulent issues going on in terms of review and approval of these transactions. So within one processing center, there were two separate areas of review. And then, of course, yours truly and a few other executives met twice a day because the program was executed so fast to review where we were, what we could do better, potentially how we needed to modify the system. And if you can imagine, we can only bring the system down a few hours every night. And whatever we brought it down for, whatever code changes we made, obviously it had to be up and running when the East Coast woke up and the dealers were banging away at it, making, to try to get their transactions in first. Give you a case in point, when we started the program, we had one processing center. We contracted with Citigroup, I believe it was, and we estimated we needed 500 processors. Like I said, the program was so hugely popular that we had to grow overnight to 6 processing centers. And, there's all of the training associated with that, but in terms of the reporting and the analysis, these were performance-based contracts. So we paid them based on successful transactions that were reviewed and approved or rejected. Well, we had one internal queue coming in, and it's based on, again, a FIFO process. So you have one central queue of transactions that you had to monitor the performance output of 6 processing centers and ensure that processing center A's queue did not go dry, if you will, if they were processing much more than processing center Z. So those are the kind of things that we had to do in terms of shifting workload and ensuring that, from those operational reports that they were accurate, and we kept the, the queues, if you will, healthy. So, just some examples. Here's just some snapshots. I mentioned about the National Summary of Crush Status. So again, like I said, we had to ensure that these guzzlers were taken off of the roadways. And here's just a quick little snapshot, red, yellow, and green. We set the thresholds based on what was prudent at the time of the program. NHTSA had a handful of investigators and enforcers that we wanted to target smartly to the dealers who were not complying, if you will, with reporting on the crush status of those trade-ins. So you got 23,000 dealers and you got, 10 investigators, and you obviously want to focus on the bad apples. This was just a method of quickly identifying how many trade-in vehicles were actually getting reported through that DOJ system I mentioned earlier. And it turned out very effective because we could, smartly execute our minimum resources to the parts of the United States and dealer communities that we needed to focus in on. Just some additional views. This is, we could drill, the power of this, obviously, drilling up and drilling down. This is dealer summary for all cars. Putting it all together, various, dashboards. I kind of talked through different aspects of the reporting that were important to us. We could drill down at a state level, down to the dealers, obviously, and all the way down to the individual transactions, and all of the 8 terabytes of attachments associated with that transaction. So our investigators, again, are in the field, and they're trying to understand that they're investigating potential bad either transactions or non-compliant dealers. They have at their fingertips all of that information pertinent to an individual transaction. So just various, again, other views in terms of searching and filtering as needed on the fly, one-stop view, fully integrated views, multiple data sets, drill up from this view to supporting views, full download of all related transaction attachments. I already spoke to that. So just in terms of conveying how well or not the program did to, or performed, if you will, in terms of congressional goals. One of the congressional goals, obviously, was job growth. This was a stimulus program, so we wanted to track the increase in jobs in the automotive manufacturer community, which was pretty hurting at the time, as we all know in the news. And so here's a simple, pie chart showing the continent and then the country of origin for the new vehicles that were purchased. And as you can see, predominantly North American vehicles are in green, and the other slice of the pie, United States in terms of the country of manufacturing origin. So we could tell pretty effectively, and of course we could drill down even further by automotive manufacturer and deduce the increase in jobs. And we could slice and dice this in terms of what the most popular vehicles were, obviously, and Toyota was at the top, even though, again, United States was the country of origin in terms of manufacturing. Here is just a simple geospatial-enabled view. We used the Google API and just showed by state the participation in terms of number of transactions. We could go down to the state and the congressional district, invoices by state detail, the county, county dealers. Greening, again, congressional objective, lower the carbon footprint throughout the United States. The greener the state, the higher the fuel efficiency from the vehicles that were traded in versus the new vehicles. Analysis roll-up of data. So, at the end of the day, the program was successful, and I didn't know that little thing was going to roll. My staff do things like just to throw me off, I guess. It's like, okay, all right, that was cute. The program was successful. We were able to demonstrate through the visualization of dashboards that it did meet the congressional goals. Retraction of funds was manageable. Compliance, we had the right information to put in our investigators' hands so that they could maximize their limited resources. And we had the confidence in the data from, again, it was replicated hourly at the height of the program to ensure accuracy from the transaction to the offline data warehouse. So how are we going to use these technologies in the future? Well, a lot of promise, a lot of use in terms of predictive analysis, trend analysis. We have, on the vehicle safety side of our mission, various operational data sources that we will be looking to associate and integrate. So, for example, NHTSA collects approximately 100,000 consumer complaints from our website, and so we're going to be integrating that data with do automotive sampling and crash test sampling of crashes that occur throughout the United States. So we'll be associating that information. And along with, we also collect information whenever there's a vehicle crash that results in a fatality. We collect a pretty robust data set for that information. And so, I mean, the bottom line is the sooner that we can integrate all of this information together and identify and spot vehicular defects, make, manufacture, active component, obviously, the safer we're all going to be on our roadways and our highways. So that's the goal. I will tell you that the technology and the data architecting is probably not, is challenging, but probably not the most challenging. I think at this vantage point, I think the culture change is more challenging, frankly, because you have getting people to trust that you're going to get it right. You have, we have a cadre of safety defect engineers, and they've told me spotting a vehicular trend is part science and part art, you know. And so trying to replicate the intuitive factor, and you know, maybe we will get it right, maybe we won't, but and you have to understand that this is their bread and butter, this is their job. So, you know, automating what is up here can be pretty threatening. So I think culturally, you know, and I'm not saying anything you guys haven't run into probably in your own similar implementations, just being cognizant of those issues. And really, it's all about, like any relationship, it's all about the underlying trust. And so having a win-win solution and implementation is where we really want to go forward. So with that, I think I finished a little early, but I'll open it up for questions. John.
First of all, those who don't know, I mean, I didn't wasn't already started, but Colleen really stepped into the hot seat on day one of her job. It was all over the press that day.
Thank you.
The quandary came up at the time was, if you're planning a party, you put up a tent, you don't build a house. And Casper Clunkers was a park.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that was part of the optics of this project. But you're not going to do the most robust systems development project for something that was, what, 6 weeks in duration.
Correct.
How did you deal with that dilemma that people were both criticizing you for not doing it right, and yet, on the other hand, realizing it, you know, it was a throwaway,
Yeah.
and then that the business analytics is what you really need to grow into?
Right. That was very critical in terms of the decision-making. So you're absolutely right, John. You know, we couldn't build a Cadillac. We didn't have time to build, you know, to deploy a Cadillac, if you will. But where there were areas where we knew there was going to be long-term reuse, like the data warehouse, the business intelligence tools, which we're, you know, again, leveraging in the other mission areas, we definitely wanted to put our resources in the data architecting, ensuring that the schema, we use the STAR schema, was reusable and supportable going forward. On the transactional system, we used a tailored COTS, and we looked at the criticality of the business rules to ensure that, you know, it had to support FIFO. It had to support multiple processing centers. We had to have 2 layers of compliance reviews. And there were probably about 10 or 15, I'm not saying they weren't important business rules, but we just couldn't get them all in time. And so it was really a huge change management process in terms of prioritization of what had to get done and what could be supplemented either manually, where we weren't going to suffer down the road in terms of an audit or just a mismanagement of funds. So I will tell you that it was very intense, and, the decision-making, you had to have all folks at the table in terms of giving the business perspective and the end-user perspective of what needed to be instantiated. So, yes, sir.
Where did you get the money to do this job, and was there any limitation on the money?
Within the $1 billion that Congress appropriated for the program, NHTSA was allowed, and I thought this was a generous amount, we were allowed to carve off 10% for the administration of the program. So now that included the IT, that included the investigations, that included contracting with the processing agents, all of that. I'm happy to say, proud to say, that when they allocated the additional $2 billion, we were able to still maintain within that initial 10%, and actually have given some money back. So, it was, I don't know the exact number we're at now, but some of the money has gone back to the Treasury because we did not use the full $100 million. Yes.
Hi. I'd be interested in knowing if the visualization and the business intelligence capability that your organization delivered for the Cash for Clunkers has actually helped increase, say, the visibility or the buy-in for your architecture program. As in, has this capability, have people seen this as one of the positive things that architecture can deliver, and maybe as a result, you're winning over more people who might have been suspect prior?
Yeah, I probably subscribe to the same thinking that you've heard multiple times this week, in that it is architecture, but we probably don't call it architecture. So obviously there's data architecture in terms of association and unification of various data sets to support some business question or trend. That's in there. We need those skill sets there. But I think kind of leading on the chin with the EA program, at least that has not been my philosophy. It's been more, how can we use structured analysis to help you solve your business problems? And so I think, whatever is necessary in terms of processing analysts, data architects, infrastructure experts, whatever we need to give a turnkey solution is what we'll bring to bear in terms of that IPT. But certainly indirectly, yes, it has. So to answer your question, yes, because I'm pulling on those folks to help solve those problems. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thanks for your attention.